like the number one phone hacking technology, and it doesn't take anything at all. It's literally, I get a message on WhatsApp. If I just press on that contact that sent me the message, Pegasus is now in my phone, and they have access to everything, all of the data, even the metadata that's in my phone, and can track me, can listen in to me, everything. And just recently, actually, the Mexican president's phone was hacked. It was a phone that she said she never used, and it was just like a personal phone. But if you're able to hack the president's phone, anyone is at risk. And Mexico is a main consumer of or user of Pegasus technology.
Who are they deploying all this stuff against? Is it cartel on cartel for the most part?
No, it's anyone that threatens their operations. So, of course, yes, they're cartel adversaries, but politicians, law enforcement, journalists, even sometimes people who are working for them, their own straw buyers, people who they feel like they can't fully trust. Stay Frosty put some Pegasus on his phone.
What about the drones?
What about the drones?
Who are they deploying that on?
They're deploying the drones against Mexican forces. They if there is an operation that's going down, they know Mexican forces are going to be in this area. They will even trap them. So lead Mexican forces, this happened not so long ago, an example of this, lead Mexican forces to believe that a key figure is here or a key lab is here, and they will arm that location with IEDs and have drones ready to go in there. Mexican forces will get there and they get exploded.
Okay, so they hit them with IEDs and then do a drone swarm.
Yeah.
How big are the drone swarms? Any idea?
It really depends on like which cartel is operating this, but for the most part, they're not that large. They have just like even just like regular drones. They're using like even like the DJI drones, or they're getting the drones from China that are like a knockoff version and attaching bombs to it and just dropping those in. And you'll even see videos of when they're flying, they're kind of weighed down a bit.
So nothing like 100 drones coming all at once, like some of the
No,
stuff
it's
we're
not to
seeing
that
in Russia and
extent.
Ukraine.
At least not yet.
How far out do you think we are before that starts happening?
It depends if the U.S. puts boots on the ground in Mexico. Because I don't think Mexican forces will ever push it to a point where cartels feel like that's how hard they need to hit them.
You don't?
No.
You don't think so?
No. There's too much at risk, and there's too much for them to lose. I think, something that really stood out to me.
What's the risk? What do you mean there's too much for them to lose?
For Mexican special forces to be at risk of danger. I was going to say, when I was in Sinaloa, they had just, the day that I got there, we went to the base, and they had just brought in reinforcements for National Guard. And a lot of the people were very young, and they were literally coming into a place where they were ready to face the cartels head on. I mean, every night it was just like, you would just see the fireworks, the shootouts. In the morning, there would be dead bodies lining major highways with notes, sending messages. And so these guys were coming in knowing that they had to take on a very desperate cartel head on and try to stop some extreme level of violence with very little experience. They were very young. And some of them looked so nervous and even fearful to be there. And if there is that level of fear, then when you ask me, are these guys going to go in and take them head on to a point where the cartels will completely amp up and you have 100 drone swarms going in there and just taking out Mexican forces? No, because I don't think the Mexican forces would get to that level. I mean, hugs not bullets was a policy for so long that now to switch that up and go have the pendulum swing to the exact opposite, where it's like, no, we are going to take them on. I don't think the people who are in the forces, I don't want to undermine it, and I don't mean it like this, but I don't think the training and the morale is even there to be like, I'm going in to die for this. We're taking these guys out. So no, Mexican cartels won't likely, unless US forces come into Mexico, get to a level where they believe they have to completely amp up operations where it's like Ukraine, Russia style, simply due to the fact that Mexican forces aren't going to push them to that level.
So you don't think that they're proactive enough to start to stock up on drones, start getting 3D printers and printing their own drones and all of these things?
Proactive, yes.
Or if U.S. forces do come in,
100%.
you don't think they'll deploy them though, unless
US steps in.
Interesting.
Because they won't have a need to. But are they proactively stocking up? 100% yes, and I've been told about this from the very people in charge of ensuring that they are armed.
Do they have strategic locations where they're stocking up? I mean, since you're saying that they are proactive, do they have strategic locations where they're stocking up on tech, weapons, all this kind of stuff? Do they know what? Do they think they might know what it might look like, where the fight's going to begin?
Yes, it's okay. First and foremost, there are safe houses throughout all of Mexico where they're stocking up on this, and particularly, surprisingly enough, in a lot of tourist destinations because it's easy access. A lot of these places have water access. It goes under the radar. So Puerto Vallarta, Acapulco, these are cities that the cartel is using to their advantage to stock up in because they already have a lot of operations going on there. And because they know that those areas won't be hit as a war zone because they're tourist hotspots. So Mexico will never want to scare away the tourism sector. So if they have a safe house in a place like Puerto Vallarta, which is also the CJ&G stronghold, filled with arms, filled with tech, drones, 3D printers, you name it, they can get there, they can get the access, they can get someone to bring it out to them, and it won't be a problem. Now, in terms of the places that would be hit, like say US operators stepped into Mexico, again, it won't be those particular regions. It will be Sinaloa, it will be Culiacan, it will be Michoacan, it will be Guerrero, it will be Tamaulipas, areas where Veracruz, and there's a port in Veracruz.
You're saying that's where we would deploy?
Yes.
I think that's probably where we would deploy conventional guys if we did that. But as far as strategic strikes, when you bring in tier 1 units, I mean, those guys are going to go everywhere. It doesn't matter.
I agree. And I think that the cartels certainly know that. They're bracing for it. A lot of them are worried that that's going to happen. If it hasn't already, there's some level of American intervention in Mexico. I mean, we've seen it with the CIA planes that are flying, that they obviously have Mexican permission to do that, but there's CIA planes flying across the northern Mexican states. The U.S. is certainly gathering intel, and they're working bilaterally with Mexico. How long will that last, or how far is that going? Not to the point that Mexico would like to see. But the U.S. knows that they have to withhold some information and a lot of intelligence in order for their operations not to fail. Because the one wrong person finds out about it, whether that's in government, whether that's in Mexican intelligence, and the whole operation goes to shit. Even with El Chapo's family going into Tijuana, or going across the border and receiving a sort of safe haven in the U.S., Mexico didn't know about that. Mexico hasn't received information on that. And the head of national security for Mexico made a point to say, we aren't in the loop with this.
How do you think we defeat them? I'm just curious. Have you thought about that all?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. And people ask me that all the time. And people ask that because they want to see it happen. But how does that happen? It would be a multifaceted approach. Like, there's no silver bullet. We both know this. And it's very complicated because they have their claws so enthralled in every aspect. You know, whether it's the ways that they're diversifying their revenue in oil and gas and whatever it is, but also in politics and internationally. So to defeat this Fortune 500 corporation that's armed to the max, and is always a step ahead, it would be a matter of cracking down on extreme intelligence gathering, finding out where the main guys are, dismantling them and their local networks, dismantling their online propaganda projects, tackling the people particularly who are under the radar and in charge of laundering a lot of the money, setting up the shell companies, the remittance sites that are allowing these cartels ways to launder their money internationally, the banks. It goes so deep. It wouldn't just be a matter of go get the big guy like when they got El Mayo this summer.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tackle the finances.
Yeah, I think a lot about this. I mean, I don't think, we just did that for 20 years in the war on terror, taking out leaders. I think the number 2 had like a 2-week life expectancy, but every time you take one out, it's,
New ones in.
new ones in. And so I don't think taking out just the leadership would work.
What do you think needs to happen?
I don't know. I mean, if we infiltrated, it would be extremely bloody just because of the amount of people that are involved in the cartel. It wouldn't work if you just took out the leadership. I just from the years of covering this, here and there and throughout with the different people that I've had on, I think that the way to do it would be, and I don't know. Like I said, it's been a minute since I've talked about this, but I don't know how combative the cartels are towards each other anymore. But I think what I would do is I would probably create some type of a psychological operation that pits the cartels against each other and basically create a false narrative so that this cartel and this
Takes
cartel
out the
hate
other.
each other and they go to war with each other and then find ways to intervene and you know what I mean? And
Well,
take
that's
them all
basically
out.
what's happening in Sinaloa.
Is that what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, El Mayo was brought to the U.S., kidnapped allegedly, and now we're in real time watching the fall of the Sinaloa cartel.
Just from pulling him?
Yeah,
Well, then maybe
El Chapo was gone. Now El Mayo is gone, and the infighting began. And just like a house of cards, it's falling in on itself. But to the same point, CJ&G swoops in, says we will make an alliance, Chapitos and us, which, how real can that alliance be when they've been sworn enemies? And what's essentially going to happen is CJ&G is going to take over that faction and take over Sinaloa. So great. What your suggestion was work to completely dismantle the Sinaloa cartel that has been operating for forever and was at one point one of the largest cartels in Mexican history. But now we have CJ&G. So what, you do the same thing with them?
Yeah.
And it just keeps going on until they're done.
Well,
But the supply and demand for drugs.
I mean, how many cartel members were eliminated, in that scuffle between those?
Oh, at this point, hundreds that were
That's it?
operating with the Sinaloa cartel.
Mm-hmm.
So people of importance, yeah.
Doesn't have to be people of importance. I mean, there's also a psychological factor as well, where maybe these weren't as brutal as they are now,
I mean,
or it could be way
enough
off. You tell
people
me.
were eliminated for this cartel to not be functioning, basically, at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for them to have to strike a deal with an enemy cartel, an adversary.
How many big ones are there?
Cartels
Yeah.
in Mexico.
How many big ones?
Okay, well,
Who are the top three?
I would say the top 3: CJ&G, the Gulf Cartel, Cartel del Noreste, and, well, Sinaloa. I'll keep it still there. So
And they're crumbling. Sinaloa.
Sinaloa is crumbling. Yeah, that's why I didn't put it in top 3, but it would certainly be in top 3. And I think the U.S. designated 8 of them, if I'm not mistaken, as foreign terrorist organizations, which included all those I mentioned and a few more. But for example, like, there were certain factions of cartels or fragmented versions of cartels that were not on that list. And when you have fragmented groups of a previously stronghold cartel still existing, those groups end up attaching on to a larger cartel that's operating. And it just makes them stronger because they gain more territory, they gain access to more people, more guns.
What do you think happens if we go to China and we're able to stop the precursors from being shipped?
It doesn't matter because the Sinaloa cartel is now, it just came out a few months ago, is taking chemistry students from universities in Sinaloa and having them try to figure out how to make the precursors
Is
from
it working?
scratch. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I have a feeling that there's probably batches out on the streets, or they're preparing batches that have these homemade precursors now. We'll see if it works. It's just like what happened with fentanyl. You have to see what happens with the streets. But from what I can tell, and the people in Sinaloa that I've spoken to, they're still yet to make those precursors tangible enough to actually make the fentanyl from them. But they're already trying to cut out China.
They're trying to cut China out.
Yeah, by making the precursors.
That's why they're doing it? They want to cut China out.
Cut China out. Increase your profits. Cut out that middleman, not even a middleman, because they're supplying the necessary goods to produce this deadly drug. But once the cartels figure out how to make the precursors, fentanyl will become more accessible than ever before, more deadly than ever before. And I think the US certainly knows that the cartels are trying to make the precursors, which is definitely a big part of the reason of the crackdown.
I mean, it seems like they wouldn't want to cut China out.
Why not?
Because, I mean, even though they don't have the same goals, I think the cartel is money and China is the reverse opium war. You know, I mean, they serve each other well, I guess is what I'm saying. And so that's interesting that they want to cut them out. I would think that they would want to align more, but
I don't think it would be they would cut them out in a way where it ends on bad terms, but rather it would just streamline the fentanyl production. Would they still probably bring in some of the precursors? Yeah, supplement the supply, but it won't be to the same extent, and it wouldn't end with a bad taste in anyone's mouth, because certainly they leverage a good relationship with China.
Interesting. Let's take another quick break. We all see it.
Chona look, which is, you know, the body, small waist, you know, curves, long blonde hair from Guadalajara. And Guadalajara is a hot spot. It's the CG&G, you know, birthplace, Jalisco. And so a lot of people followed her because she was pretty, but also because she was always on live streaming, keeping it pretty real. She would just eat her favorite snacks on there. And actually, since she was murdered, people in her memory have been like buying her favorite snacks and posting about it and to keep her alive. Now she's on this live stream and she's at her beauty salon that she owned. And she tells the audience that she's been told she's receiving 3 gifts that day. And the last one is going to be an expensive gift. And so she's kind of talking through, she's excited. And a friend of hers is also at the salon with her. And first she gets a Starbucks. A delivery man comes by, drops a Starbucks. And I think at that same delivery, she got a plushie of a pig. And it's so interesting because in Mexico too, like a pig or a pig's head is really significant. You know, it's like puerco. So you get a lot of the times too, people will, in Guadalajara even, when people take out hits, they'll leave a pig's head on top of that person, show that person was dirty or vile, whatever the message it may be. And she got that plushie. And then she gets flowers, and then she's waiting for her 3rd most expensive gift. And she starts saying in the live stream, she goes, "Ya me ondié," like I'm creeped out. Something's wrong. And you can tell she's kind of on edge. And she says, "You know what, girls, I think I'm gonna go. I'm kind of creeped out." And her friend tells her behind the camera, no, you can't go. There's another gift coming for you. And some context to this is that Valeria had received gifts from viewers before. She really liked gifts, and she would talk about how she would date men who would give her extravagant gifts, and a lot of viewers would send her things. And someone comments in the chat, "You shouldn't tell people where you are." And she says, "Well, you know, everyone knows that this is my salon," something along those lines. And then a delivery man comes, she's looking out, and she mutes the live. And then you just see her take 3 bullets. And the first bullet, I've watched this video so many times at this point, she's wearing like a chain necklace. And the first bullet, because people were saying it was fake and that it didn't look like the bullet even hit her. But the first bullet hits her necklace, and her necklace goes flying off. It hits the pendant. The whole necklace goes flying off. She gets shot again, and then she gets shot in the head. And she's like slumped over, and her hair is covering her whole face. So the video is really jarring because you're seeing a woman get murdered on live, being shot 3 times, but it's not like this cinematic boom, 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 and she's all bludgeoned, and she just kind of slumps in, and she's holding the pig plushie too, dead. And the friend comes over, picks up the phone, and turns off the live stream. And people were saying, you know, you didn't hear screaming, but it's important to keep in mind she muted the live. Why did she mute the live? If she was so scared, why didn't she leave? She already had that feeling. And so people are saying that the friend set her up, or that her ex-boyfriend, who is allegedly part of organized crime, I want to say like objectively just an unattractive guy, especially for a girl she's very beautiful. She had a very striking look. They say he was responsible for it. But the interesting thing is, you know, where is the forensics in Mexico and an investigation? She was murdered now like weeks ago at this point, and nobody has come out to say who the main suspects are, what the state of the investigation is. And this became international news because there's this beautiful girl being murdered on TikTok live stream, and people interacting with her as she's talking about being scared. People in the comments were even saying to her, "If you feel weirded out or uncomfortable, just go home." I mean, if this was a hit that was planned on her, then it would have happened no matter where she was. Then you have a lot of conspiracy theorists or people, conspiracies going around saying that she didn't actually die. She was probably being threatened, and so she faked her death on live, and that it was AI, and it doesn't, the way the blood splatters on the table and the way she falls over holding the plushie, it just doesn't look like someone who had been shot 3 times. So this, though, the murder speaks volumes to the state of Mexico, like the entire country, because over the past couple of months, a lot of YouTubers and social media influencers have fallen victim to being publicly murdered like this. Whether they have narco ties or not is one thing, but this is certainly sending a message. If you do not do what we say or follow our agenda, especially with the large platform you have, or you do us dirty, you're dead. And you know, the problem too with this being so publicized is there's a lot of false information that's coming out, and a lot of false theories that people are taking and running with as if it's fact. So, and then people are also editing fake videos of her. I saw one video of her, and it's very hard to tell if it's real or not, where she's got a song in the background and she's kind of like lip syncing it, and the caption on the video is like, basically to the gist of, you know, use men for what they can give you, enjoy the benefits of it, but, you know, basically like have multiple guys who can give you nice things and don't get attached. And people were saying, she was a gold digger who messed with the wrong person and she got her karma, which at the end of the day, someone was murdered. So it's really fucked up to say that, even if this isn't a perfect victim to you. But it's also hard to tell what is real and what isn't about her because it's such a publicized case. She had such a large platform on social media. And there doesn't seem to be much transparency with her investigation.
Why do you think she was murdered?
One of two reasons. So I have two theories. I think the one that sticks out to me the most is she was probably dating the wrong guys. She didn't grow up wealthy. She came from very humble beginnings. And I think that, she was a beautiful girl and she used that to her advantage. Dated guys who were cartel associates, part of organized crime, and she pissed someone off. She had already posted previously on her Instagram screenshots of messages with a boyfriend where he was threatening to kill her and said, "You've never seen me mad and you don't want to see me mad, but you're going to force me to do something I don't want to do." And she posted and said, "If something happens to me or my family, it's this guy." So that's what I think happened, is that she broke up with a guy who had a very fragile ego, or she did him dirty in some way in terms of their relationship, and he sought revenge. And he did it publicly to send a message. It makes sense to do it on live. This is what happens if you're gonna fuck with me or make a fool of me. You die. And the way that the message was set up, getting the pig plushie, 3 gifts, and then the last one is the most expensive and you get 3 bullets. It looks like a narco hit. But then there is that other part of me that maybe wonders, maybe that so-called friend wasn't actually a friend, because I talked to my best friend about it and I said, "What would you do if we were just sitting there and I got shot?" Because, especially with this job, I run the risk. And she said I would freak out. And she goes, "I don't think that I would even have the capacity to think about picking up your phone and turning off the live and then attending to you. The first thing would be to attend to the person." But that's purely speculation.
Was the shooter on video?
There is CCTV video of a guy coming up on a motorcycle outside.
On the live stream, though?
No.
So maybe she shut it off before that. I mean, he was probably wearing a mask, but maybe she shut it off before that reveal happened.
Well, yeah, because the phone is facing her and she's facing the window. So you can see when she's receiving these gifts, or you can see when she sees someone comes up to give her a gift. And her friend was on the other side in the salon.
Gotcha.
And then some people are saying, well, if you look at where the bullets came from, they didn't come from in front, they came from the side, and the friend probably took that moment to shoot her. But this also happens a lot in Mexico. Anywhere. The pretty girl gets killed. It's like the Gabby Petito case. It becomes this huge debacle, and there's so many theories. But in Mexico, it's particularly distinct because there is also that element of organized crime and corruption and lack of oversight in investigations. And so something like this happens and people want justice. Are you going to get that justice? It depends on who the perpetrator is.
How about propaganda? How are they recruiting? What are they using?
Propaganda, I would say, it's funny because you asked me, how do you tackle the cartels in this whole issue? I think propaganda, based on what I've seen, is one of the major components that needs to be tackled first. And we're nowhere near there. Because propaganda at this point, cartel propaganda, is deeply entrenched in every aspect of Mexican culture, society, and daily life.
How so?
So, first things first, the music, okay? You have these narco corridos, songs that are literally dedicated to certain capos or certain cartels, and they are fully, blatantly glamorizing this lifestyle. The singers are, whether it's Peso Pluma, Junior H, Nathaniel Cano. There's so many of them. The list goes on, but they're super popular. They top charts in Mexico and in the United States too. In their music videos, they have the Rolex presidential whole Gucci outfit, and they're singing about, you know, they're strapped up with the scar, and they drive the cars around that are fully armored. They get their money, they're selling the merchandise, and they make this life seem so enticing.
Mm-hmm.
You have so much money, you have all these hot girls, you have all of everything that's trendy, and you have a great beat to accompany it. Because I must say, like, sometimes I listen to these songs too, and I'm like, this is great. This is a great song. But what it's the narrative it's pushing is absolutely horrible. And so the Mexican government has tried to crack down on this. I mean, corridos have been banned in Sinaloa for a while, and a lot of other states have banned this music genre in public places, at establishments, at concerts. Actually, a lot of Mexican musicians are now being sanctioned and having their visas revoked by the US for their lyrics, what they're singing, because it so explicitly promotes cartel propaganda. And the Mexican government plays their role in, and the federal government actually just put out this initiative, Mexico Canta, Mexico Sings, to encourage people to participate in like this, basically a competition where you can play music, you have a band or sing a song, original singer-songwriter, whatever it is, but that it has nothing to do with cartels or narco propaganda. And the interesting thing is, when the Mexican government talks about this genre of music, they particularly focus on violence against women, violent acts, and drug trafficking. What they're missing, that is the key point, is, hey, young people, this is propaganda. This life is actually not as cool as these songs are making them seem to be. This is how you die. This is how you end up like Valeria. You want to be that pretty girl with a rich guy on your side? Yeah, well, guess what? He might kill you afterwards. And a lot of these young people in Mexico certainly fall for it, and I don't blame them. You're being inundated with this music, these TV shows, this culture that's promoting a lifestyle that on the surface seems so luxurious. Wouldn't you want to have the extra cash too? You're growing up in a place where both of your parents are working very hard, and, you know, maybe you can't even afford your schooling. But Buddy on the radio is telling you that you could pick up your parents in a G-Wagon. You just have to take part of this lifestyle. And so the propaganda is deep in the pop culture. On the other hand, you have blatant forms of propaganda through social media, which now has exploded for them. I mean, social media is a major tool for the cartels. And Mexico has also tried to crack down on this. They're constantly banning TikTok accounts that are promoting cartel propaganda or trying to recruit people.
What does that propaganda look like?
On TikTok?
Yeah.
Is
it the same stuff? Luxurious lifestyle, lots of flashy shit.
It's the flashy shit, but it's also the actual operations. You'll have like a good song, and they're showing them loading up kilos into a light aircraft and flying it across, Pablo Escobar style. They kind of switch the aesthetic based on whichever platform they're on and who they're trying to appeal to.
Gotcha.
So you have those type of TikTok accounts, and they're showing the money, they're showing the guns, but they're also showing the actual warfare. They are showing some of the ugly side of it, but they're making it seem cool. It's like militarized. And then you'll have a link in the bio of that TikTok account that you click it and it directly opens a WhatsApp group chat. That's the beginning step of cartel recruitment, where you're
kidding.
Yeah, you're joining this group chat, and you have certain higher level operatives for the cartel in there that will ask you certain questions or tell you what you're getting into. And then they vet you based on your answers to those questions or the personal information you give. Then you move into a different group chat, and then another one, and it kind of goes down the steps. to the point where you're then in direct contact with high-level cartel operatives who are actively helping you get into the cartel. And literally to the point where it's like, okay, a car will come and pick you up from your address now that you've shown us that you are willing to be a part of our group. And it'll take you to a bus station. You get on that bus, you're going to meet us here, and you're going to train for 6 months in the mountains of Puerto Vallarta. So the social media is just the first step to this. And it's major for them because without numbers, without this support, the cartels can't function. And if you have vulnerable, impressionable young people who are looking for a fatter paycheck, who are enamored by this lifestyle, and who want to be a part of something, you have the perfect victim. And you take them in and you absolutely abuse the shit out of them and dehumanize them, and you turn them into a machine and you give them some money. And now this is the beginning part of someone working for the cartel.
How do they advance? Is this all like family members that stay at the top, or how do you advance if you're,
just a
Joe
new guy?
Schmo that's just wanting to get recruited and get in there?
So it is mainly family members, but then it's about proving your loyalty. How much are you going to do for us? And especially if when you prove your loyalty, it's successful. So a good example of this could be, you're starting off, you're, fresh in the cartel. You just got out of the training. And then you find out that one of the National Guard members that you guys are paying off is actually acting as an informant or also on the adversary's payroll, whatever the case may be, right? And then you go and you tell the boss, hey, I know this, this, and this. I'll go kill him, or I'll go torture him. Then you move your way up. Or, hey, I know a way that we can move this amount of undetected fentanyl from one American state to another. No one's going to figure it out. And I have a good connect over there. Let's do it. Okay, they run the operation. Profits increase. Now you're on your way up.
Gotcha.
It's action-based. And really showing loyalty, your willingness to die for the organization. But this all starts off, on social media. It's ridiculous. And the Mexican government has done like a crackdown. They've removed multiple TikTok accounts, but there can only be so much oversight with that. Social media is so vast. And particularly when you have young people who are using a tool that didn't exist before, because cartel propaganda has always existed. We've seen like in Juarez back in the early 2000s, and even today, but you have people hanging from bridges, pants pulled down, and a narcomanta on top of them, a message to whoever is next, or this is what will happen to you if you act like these rats. That's a form of propaganda, but that is tangible, blatant propaganda. You bring social media into the mix, it fucks up the whole game. Because how do you apply any oversight to this? How do you ensure that young people aren't being targeted just through the phone that they always have in their hand? And that's why these social influencers, media influencers, are main targets. A major YouTuber in Mexico, Marquitos Toys, he has millions of subscribers. He shows this flashy lifestyle. He's from Sinaloa. His brother was murdered in Baja California. And then it's constant. It's constant.
Are you saying they're murdering influencers as part of the propaganda machine?
It's certainly part of the propaganda because it sends a loud message. And I think a lot of these influencers also have their role in organized crime, whether it's laundering money or pushing some sort of narrative. In Mexico, a lot of the time when you make a lot of money or you gain a platform, somehow the cartel will find a way to use you to push their agenda forward.
What kind of narrative would they be sending out through an influencer?
Exactly this, the propaganda, that they're not the bad guys. That this is a luxury lifestyle and you should be part of it.
Okay, so it's basically it's essentially the same thing as the songs.
Yeah, it's the recruitment, and also to put pressure on their adversaries. So the music does it too, the YouTubers do it too. It's very much like we're with CJ and G, cuatro letras, fuck whoever else our adversary is. And it garners larger support throughout the population for that one cartel. Like even nowadays, people will ask me, who do you want to win in Sinaloa? Chapo or Mayo? And I'm like, what do you mean? And there were people have those conversations. I will be at a regular dinner with people who have absolutely nothing to do with this. They're completely out of the realm, and they're talking about which side of the faction they support. And that's what the propaganda is doing.
Do you think they're using reporters like yourself as part of their propaganda machine?
I think so, and I think that's why a lot of reporters are murdered, because a lot of reporters don't want to be a part of that. But for the most part, they have no choice, especially people who are working for small to medium sized outlets in regions where there is such a cartel stronghold, and they don't want certain news stories to get out, or they want certain news stories to get out with a narrative. Yeah. And they're not even getting paid for that. It's just a life or death scenario.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How much of the cartel's money or how much money in general are they seeding into US politics?
A lot of the cartel money is in the US, point blank. Whether that is through the shell companies or certain operations that they're conducting in the US. In terms of politics, there are a number of US politicians or US authorities in law enforcement that are on the cartel payroll. For the most part, this happens in border towns or in states that are major profit regions for the cartel. So that's California, Texas, Arizona.
So are these local governments or all the way up to
It goes up high on the food chain.
how high? How high are they getting?
To the federal level.
To the federal level?
Yeah. I've seen it firsthand.
Who in the federal level? Senators, congressmen, what are we talking about? FBI agents? What do you have any idea?
On the federal level, cartels have basically infiltrated any member of politics that they believe they can get to, that is willing to work with them, and that can push policy that directly benefits them. So whether it's senators, congressmen, DEA, ICE even, they have their claws in all of these departments.
Do you think these people know that it's the cartel who's influencing them?
I think a lot of them do.
How would you know?
How would I know that these people know, or how would they know?
Would the cartel want these people to know that that's who I mean, basically it's lobbying, right? So would the cartel want their quote unquote lobbying firm being known as? I would think they wouldn't want them known as, hey, this is a cartel lobbying firm. This is set up by, the Sinaloa or whoever. I think if I was them, I would try to get my narrative or whatever I'm lobbying for to appear as something innocent or just money driven, or do you see what I'm saying? I wouldn't want the individual to know that it's coming from a cartel, because I think
It's less
that would be
incentivizing, and it's
yeah.
blatantly illegal. It happens both ways. So certainly they have these lobbying groups set up, or they can push their agenda in a way where it doesn't seem like it's directly coming from them. Now, at the end of the day, I have an issue with this because I find that it's hard not to know. Anyone with half a brain, especially if you're in a high-ranking position of power, you could dig deep enough to figure it out. And they do have ways to use it to their advantage with certain companies they have and
I mean, what would they? I mean, you wouldn't have to like. What's an obvious one? An obvious one they would be lobbying for would be border security, right?
yes.
So nobody would have to know that it's the cartel that's lobbying for that specific, for the border. They could do the, they could just get a group of people that here the U.S. is very divided. They could just get somebody that thinks that we should have open borders and create that group and fund it. And then all it is just a bunch of people that want to let illegal immigrants through, you know what I mean? And they lobby that. So it doesn't have to. That's how I would do it. I mean, but what other things would they be lobbying for other than open borders?
It would be open borders. It would be lack of oversight of agriculture coming from Mexico. It would certainly be drug policies, so like safe supply stuff. And also, I think a major one would be the arms dealing too, because the majority of the guns that are used at Mexican crime scenes, like 70%, are American-made firearms. So all of their guns are coming from, most of their guns are coming from the U.S. And so they're not going to want that to shut down or to stop at any point in time, because without those weapons, they can't commit the crimes. And because you can't really get a gun in Mexico the way you can get a gun here, which is exactly why they use that to their advantage. So that would be, and not to mention, a lot of the straw buyers too are moving guns from the US into Canada to arm these same people. So that's a big one that I believe that they're lobbying for. I mean, yeah, the border one is a big one, but without the guns, they can't run any of their operations. But you asked, why would they want people to know that they are a cartel if they're lobbying or have certain, they have money in certain aspects of the federal government? I think in some ways, sometimes them instilling that fear does work depending on what the initiative is. And I think they do use that to their advantage sometimes. And there are certain people that they can have in their pockets, knowing that the fear and knowing that the cartel is on my ass is going to keep them doing exactly what they want and keep them from moving away or speaking out, because once you have the cartel on your ass, the only way to get out of that is basically to die. That's certainly less of the circumstance, but it is happening.
How are they using the migrant crisis as a tool?
Like people crossing the border as a tool for what?
Yeah. Cartels' control over human crossings, including children, the use of distraction groups to tie up border patrol, and the human cost, rape, enslavement, and exploitation of migrants. It sounds, I have it as they're using it as a tool for all these things. Can you elaborate on any of that? Or
I mean, I have no idea.
what is the use of distraction groups?
The use of distraction groups is so that they can get people and drugs across the border. There was actually just a video about this. It was in Texas, where you have these 5 guys in a pickup truck and they're doing donuts around, and all the CBP pulls up on them and they're trying to outrun them. Well, at the same time that's happening, there's people, a coyote illegally crossing people or drugs across the border. And that's a really common tool that they use, where they'll, they're trying to distract them one way and do something else. They do these smoke screens, and not just blatantly like that at the border, but with a lot of other actions too. Especially when...
So they're just creating a bunch of diversions.
Yes, they're creating a bunch of diversions. They'll do this too, especially if there's like a high level person who needs to get around and that can't typically cross into Mexico or the US, vice versa. They're regular border crossing, and they need to move this person and in a stealth way. So they've gotten very good at knowing what captures American authorities' attention and how to use that so they can run these profitable or high level operations at the same time that something else is going on.
Do you think they're aware of all the tech that we're implementing along the border wall and what exactly it does? Do you have any insight on that?
I think that okay, so with the people I've spoken to, especially who are working in organized crime in border regions, they know that the border tech has been amped up. In terms of to what extent, not as much as they don't know as much as they should know, but they are very hopeful. I sound like a spokesperson for the cartel. That's not the point here. Oh my God. This is just, relaying the information. But they're very hopeful in their ability to adapt because they've always done it. It's just a matter of what has changed. How has the US ramped it up? The same thing they do with the Mexican government, actually. Okay, you want to put these troops here? Oh, you want to implement this, I don't know, thermal technology that can tell you if someone's even close to the border along the over 2,000 miles that it spans? We're going to find a way around that. They typically do that, and that's why they've been so successful and profitable in every operation. But I don't want to sound like a spokesperson for the cartel, and I sometimes, talking about exactly how they're reacting to certain things, but they do adapt. That's one thing. There's a crackdown, and they find another way. It just happened in Sinaloa. The U.S. and Mexico were trying so hard, had this whole operation to get the main security enforcer for the Sinaloa cartel, La Perris.
Yeah.
They get him. There's a new guy in, and he's bigger and badder than ever before. They'll always find a way around it. Oh, Trump in his first administration is cracking down on the southern border. Fuck it, let's go to Canada.
Yeah.
And so you can put border technology across all 2,000 miles of the southern border and have it to the point where it is like Guantanamo Bay. They find a way, because if human smuggling and drug trafficking is just that profitable for them, where they're making billions, tens of billions of dollars a year by doing it, they will find a way around it. Wouldn't that be an incentive for you?
Yeah.
And would you find a way around it?
I would try. The thing is, I don't know how much we've actually, is still to this day, I don't know how much we've actually pushed them. You know what I mean? I think, if we get serious about this, I don't think they will find a way. But.
And I agree with you. I don't think they will either. Because cartels against full-fledged U.S. government, that's just a complete power imbalance.
Yeah.
The issue stands with the U.S. hasn't pushed as hard as it could. And so the cartels do feel somewhat untouchable. There are certain actions that, you extradite the 29 capos, you get El Mayo into the States, you crack down. Fentanyl seizures at the border have gone down significantly. Okay, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg. And they're so used to operating in a country with so much corruption and impunity where money talks, that if you had a government come in where none of that works, the old tricks don't work on this new dog, it would have to be a complete overhaul for them. And like we talked about, they're certainly preparing for this.
Have you heard any rumors about cartels aligning with traditional terrorist organizations?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Especially with Iran. That's a huge thing. In terms of training, what kind of weaponry they need, and intelligence is a big one, particularly when targeting America. So I know that there was an operation with Canadian authorities that were looking into organized crime groups operating with terrorist groups, and particularly in Iran. And the main objective of this was to find out how the efforts between the two were directly impacting Canadian intelligence efforts. So they were trying to compromise all of the intelligence gathering and covert operations that were going on through attacking their intelligence. And the thing about the Mexican drug cartels is, especially since Trump's first administration, they have had to amp up their efforts in knowing what the US's next move is going to be, because the US next move determines just how much money they're going to make and how they have to adapt. And so Iran and Mexican drug cartels do have a connection, and this is with high ups of the drug cartels, to understand how the US is operating their intelligence, what type of actions the US could potentially take or is taking silently against drug cartels, and ensure that they kind of build a firewall around themselves. In terms of weaponry, a lot of the techniques and certain arms that drug cartels are using, particularly now, have been learned from organized terrorist groups that have been around forever. And on a side note, it goes into their propaganda too, because Mexican drug cartels post that typical press release video admitting or denying a certain fatal tragedy that occurred, or something that, like a big news story. They address it head on. They have the script, they have the lighting, they even have the logo, the banner on it, and the background music, just like the same way ISIS was doing and the Taliban. And those videos now, like when ISIS and the Taliban was doing it, it was on social media, whatever, but it was mainly being sent to news outlets, or, you know, they were posting it on their page. It was more confined. Whereas now it's just, you put it out there and it spreads like a virus. And so a lot of their techniques, which is why it's interesting that it took so long to declare Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, because a lot of their techniques, whether it comes to gathering intelligence or infiltrating the US or Canada, and the way they are able to manage public perception of themselves, it completely matches that of traditional terrorist groups.
Wow.
The only difference, I would say, is the way a lot of these traditional terrorist groups would directly go and attack Americans, right? Like there was a bomb, there was a shooting, someone drove through a crowd. For Mexican drug cartels, it's chemical warfare, it's drugs. They don't need to go and plant a bomb in the name of drug cartels.
Do you think it'll ever get kinetic with down at the southern border?
If American boots hit Mexican soil. I've been saying this, and I really do believe that if American, especially tier 1 operators, get into Mexico, we're going to see that traditional terrorism style happen in the US, particularly along the border region. Because at that point, it's like what we said, they have nothing to lose and they will go down with a fight. And if they're already working with traditional terrorist groups, they know what the playbook says.
Man, that's terrifying to hear. What do you think the US and Canada should be doing that we're not doing?
I think there needs to be, you know, it's gotten better, especially at the southern border. I really believe so. And I've been covering that region for a while now. So you can kind of compare the differences. But what needs to be done is to tackle the root of the problem, the indoctrination and the financial pipelines. Because grabbing this, you know, picking up this big guy that runs a major faction and flaunting him around and parading him and saying, look what we did. We captured this guy. That works for 5 minutes before it's just as bad as, again, or worse. Mm-hmm. After they got El Mayo, the Sinaloa cartel just fucking exploded. It made hell, like life was a living hell, is a living hell for a lot of people in that region. And so I think tackling it at its root is what needs to happen. But that's a huge operation that goes beyond just going in and doing this covert mission to grab someone. You have to somehow put a stop to propaganda at its deepest form, monitor the socials, and target financial pipelines, like I said, remittance apps, the banks, the companies that are fronting for these groups. And that's a lot harder, I think. Do you think that's harder?
Yeah, that would be tough. It could be done. But what's interesting is I just don't think that we have really pushed on them at all. And so it'll be, if that time comes, I mean, to me, securing our border is not pushing back. That's just shit that we should have done a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a band-aid.
But if we actually go on the offensive, then, I mean, I think this could be wrapped up.
What would the offensive look like for you?
Like I said, I think what I would do is initially
I would
pit them against each other to weaken them, to keep our people safe. Let's weaken them as much as we possibly can. In the meantime, you could send in the intel reps, the operatives, to start tackling the financials. You could outbid them on the gas. There's a lot of things you could do. I'd do that, and then to wrap it up, I would send in the tier 1 units.
And I think it is slowly happening.
To demoralize them also.
Yeah.
A lot of strikes.
Because it is a psychological game too.
Yeah.
There is, aside from the CIA planes that are flying over the northern states, there's a vessel that's docked, a U.S. vessel that's docked at the Port of Veracruz. The border is militarized. And then you have like ICE, DEA allegedly working with Mexican forces to conduct operations without having to step foot in Mexico. But it seems to be like these are all precursors to something bigger that could potentially happen, especially if the US isn't seeing the result that it wants, which is what? Demoralized cartels, less fentanyl, less human smuggling, or for it to stop altogether, which I just don't see happening. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you still have to deal with this big figurehead, which is the Mexican government, who has too much reason not to crack down on these guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is what it is with them. It's our people that are being affected.
For sure.
They don't want to help their people. That's on them. But what the hell do I know? I'm just a podcaster. So anyways, well, I forgot to give you something here at the beginning.
Okay.
So do it at the end.
Oh,
Everybody
thank
gets
you.
a gift.
Thank you so much.
Vigilance Elite gummy bears.
So excited.
In the
You were
USA,
asking me about this.
Not smuggled across the border. But before we wrap it up, what are you getting ready to get into? Anything exciting?
Yes, I'm really excited. So I just did I'm doing my podcast with Ironclad, Borderland Dispatches. So I'm basically just going boots on the ground to show people exactly what's happening without having, I try to always do beyond the headline reporting, where I go and I speak to the people who are affected right there and paint the picture of what's going on. So on Borderland Dispatches, I went to the southern border, and then I went up to the northern border. I showed everyone just how open it is. And soon we're going to be going in back to Mexico to just show some of the cartel-ridden regions and how it varies from different areas and who's running what.
Does that mean you're having a crew go with you?
I operate alone.
Good for you, man.
I've been doing that.
So,
and actually, it's funny. A lot of people don't know that, but I've always done this alone. So it's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. That's a trust thing too. I feel like if I go in alone, more people will talk to me and share more information. It's disarming.
Well, where can we find you?
You can find me on the podcast, Apple, Spotify, Borderland Dispatches. I also have my Substack. It's my full name, Katarina Szulc. Everything is my full name with the most complicated spelling, SZULC.
All right, Katarina.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you having me here.
And hope to see you again.
Likewise.